He's back, 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 he's back. He's finally f***ing back! Hello, and welcome to the Wriothesley 101. Yay, whoopee, wee-wah! After a year and a half, the prison warden has finally broken out of jail and has someone who's mained him for that entire time. I got a lot of things to talk about, but right before we jump into his kit, I actually have a little disclaimer I'd like to make. The first limited 5-star that I'm making a 101 on is also the only one I pulled constellations for. Granted, it's not really a big deal. It gives him another way to get his special charged attack, and it makes his special charged attack better, but C0 Wriothesley basically doesn't use his special charged attacks, and C1 changes his combos to get them. So by doing C0 combos, I can effectively play a C0 Wriothesley. I'll talk a bit more about my thoughts on this and its actual value at the end of his kit, but let's just start with the beginning. His normal attacks. These are his main source of damage, so they're actually pretty important. He starts off with 2 left jabs before a stronger right hook, a slower duck into 2 upward jabs before ending off with a jumping haymaker. Yes, I needed all those special words to describe his punches. He's my special baby. He gets what he wants. His charged attack is a simple flying uppercut. His normal attacks have regular ICD and will apply cryo every 3rd hit, but his charged attack has no ICD and will apply cryo every time it hits. And these attacks have a few special properties. For his normal attacks, he's able to dash and use his elemental skill without interrupting the combo. This not only gives him the freedom to dodge and reposition in the middle of his combo, but because the 4th attack in his chain is pretty slow, if you time it well enough, this allows you to skip it altogether. And for his charged attack, he actually follows melee weapon rules. Other Catalyst users are able to use their charged attack without any normal attacks. Like this, they can spam them in a row. Where Wriothesley has to do a normal attack before he uses his charged. He also has a small buffer system. Someone like Baiju, click, click, hold, he does 2 normal attacks and a charged attack. Doing the same input on Wriothesley gets you 3 normal attacks and a charged attack. This is actually something that's completely unique to him, as even doing the same thing with a melee unit will get you 2 normals and a charged attack. His charged attack is also considered blunt damage, meaning that it can be used to break ores in the overworld as well as geoshields, and it also triggers shatter on frozen opponents. Okay, so that's enough about his normals. Let's look at his skill. It makes his normals stronger. Maybe you're starting to see why I spent so long talking about them. It boosts the strength of his normal attacks, but causes you to lose HP when you hit enemies with them. But notably, it does not increase the strength of his charged attacks, which you can see, there are no added particle effects. However, if he goes below 50% of his max HP, he actually loses this buff. But this doesn't cause the buff state to end, and he is able to get the buff state back if he's healed above 50 within his skill's duration. His burst is mercifully simple. Oh, wow, you didn't even get to see the animation there. I was in the wrong place. Let's hope it works here. Yeah, gorgeous. It does 5 hits of cryo damage, followed by his Usia hit. I don't think we ever reached a consensus on how to pronounce it. Not that it matters, because that mechanic basically doesn't exist outside of the whale. It's certainly not useless, but it's not a main part of his kit. It can be used for quick damage at the end of his rotations, or it can be used to clear out multiple trash mobs, as it's the largest source of AoE in his kit. Those red particle effects that I was ignoring before are his A1 passive. If he drops below 60% HP, he'll gain this particle effect, which signifies he has his empowered charge attack. This charge attack has a larger hitbox, it doesn't consume any stamina, it deals a little bit more damage, but most importantly, when he hits enemies, it'll heal him. His last ascension passive, real simple. Whenever he's punching people, if his HP changes, he'll gain a small attack boost, stacking up to 30%. So his gameplay loop seems pretty simple. He's this brawler who loses HP when he punches people, and then once he's low enough, he gets this empowered charge attack to heal him back up so he can continue punching. Right? 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 Sadly, no. While that's the core idea that's going on, Wriothesley is balanced in such a way to where he can never really reach that sweet spot. His empowered charge attack has a 5-second cooldown, so his normal attacks end up consuming HP faster than his charge attack can heal it. So if you play him without a healer, he's usually below 50% HP, and he doesn't get the normal attack damage buff from his skill. And then if you play him with a healer, he usually doesn't go below 60% HP, so you end up just never getting his empower charge attack. So you're stuck between a rock and a hard place. Don't use a healer and lose your normal attack buff, or do use a healer and never get access to your charged attack. And because his best supports, like Bennett and Xiangling, heal anyways, this is usually what ends up happening. Now, I want to make it clear that these problems don't make Wriothesley a bad unit. He still has decent damage and compelling teams, but they do, in my opinion, make him feel a lot worse than a lot of other 5-stars. And this is where C1 comes in. Not only does it reduce the cooldown of his empowered charge attack by half, but it gives you a second condition under which it can be gained. If you land the 5th attack in your normal attack combo, regardless of health, you'll get it. This fixes his issues in teams both with healers and without healers. The extra way of getting his charge attack gives him a way to access its damage in teams with healers where he wouldn't normally go below 60% health, and the reduced cooldown gives him enough healing to function in teams without healers. It also boosts the charge attack damage and lets you stay in your skill state for longer after you hit one, but in my opinion, this part of the constellation is way more important. I have this constellation. It's the only limited constellation I've ever pulled for. I don't regret it, but I do want to be clear. I think this is scummy. It is a very blatant case of create the problem and sell the solution. I think this part should absolutely be in his base kit, and this should be the C1. But what I think about how it should be doesn't really matter because this is what's in the game. So what do I think about the way that it was actually implemented? I consider this constellation to basically be a one-to-one comparison to Hu Tao's C1. Hu Tao was a good and powerful unit that was at the top of the meta for a pretty long time, but she was notoriously very clunky. Her C1 is similarly a small damage increase, but mainly it's a massive quality of life increase. The stamina saved by her C1 allows her to swap over from using jump cancels to dash cancels, which are not only faster, but they feel a lot better to do. She gets more damage, but the main value of the constellation is making her kit feel more cohesive. I consider Wriothesley C1 to be exactly the same, a big luxury constellation. I mean, as if all constellations aren't luxury. I mean that in the sense that he does not need this to work. He feels a lot better when he has this, in my opinion, but he still is a good unit with compelling teams at C0. The rest of his constellations are not nearly as interesting or divisive. They're all pretty simple damage increases. I'm never gonna get them, but I think his C4 and his C6 are actually sort of interesting. His C4 allows him to give a full party attack speed buff, which it's not useful, but it's kind of cool. And his C6 essentially makes it so that his empowered charge attack hits twice. C2 and C5 are burst buffs. C3 is a normal attack buff. Not that crazy. Now that that nightmare is finally over, let's check out his teams. It's taking me a fucking hour and a half to record about his kit. I mean, it's gonna be cut down a lot, but I have a lot of opinions. The first two teams we're gonna look at are both melt variations, and unfortunately, I do have to talk a little bit more about further investments that you make into your Wriothesley. Aside from just C1, there are a fair few recent units that have come out that have made Wriothesley feel a lot better than he did on release, Xiangling being one of them. This is your standard melt theme. Xiangling acts as a pyro applier, Xiangling fills the red shred slot, and Bennett is Bennett. Now, technically, you could use an animo unit in this slot like Kazuha or Sucrose for her EM buffing, even someone like Lynette for a little extra pyro application, but there are two reasons that I prefer Xiangling. Number one, it can be pretty hard to get cryo auras on your enemies in melt teams, especially in subsequent rotations. Xiangling always shredding cryo res as long as Wriothesley is in the team, which I assume he is, makes her way more consistent than animo units. Second, even if you manage to get a cryo aura up and swirl it, VV only has a 10-second duration. Rise is a unit that has a pretty long field time, so he really appreciates Xiangling's extended buff duration. Last thing before we get into the showcase, this creature right here. There's a lot of growing hate for Xiangling these days, and I won't say it's unwarranted. I've done my own share of Xiangling hating. But good news? She has a replacement. Bad news? It's another recent 5-star. Editing Mies jumping in. I don't have Mawika, so I haven't really gotten a chance to test her and Wriothesley together, but I have since heard that her pyro application is actually not fast enough for C0 Wriothesley. After a few charged attacks, Wriothesley ends up overtaking and applying cryo, and then Mawika starts melting from off field, which still is a team that has good DPS, but it's one where Wriothesley isn't doing much of the team's DPS. So unfortunately, if you want Wriothesley to be doing the melting, xiangling is your only option. Quick gear check. I use Lost Prayer. Generic 5-star stat stick. It's about as good as the Widsith at R5. I think actually the Widsith might be a little bit better, but I don't like the Widsith's randomness, and on a tall character who's running around a lot, I actually find the movement speed buff to be pretty useful, so I choose to use Lost Prayer. Artifacts. Meropide Hunter. This is what you want to use, especially in melt teams. And technically, Blizzard Strayer can be better in freeze teams. It's the exact same bonuses with 4% more crit rate, but of course that relies on the enemies being freezable, and it requires you to farm Blizzard Strayer in 2025. So even in freeze teams, I keep him on Meropide as a generalist set. And because we're going melt, I'm using an Elemental Mastery Sam. Let's finally get into it! As I said, I'm gonna be playing as if I had a C0 Wriothesley here, and his combo pretty simple combo, 3 normal attacks followed by a charge attack, and if you want to, jump cancel. Now I say if you want to, obviously if you do it, it helps with your DPS, but unlike Hu Tao, he's not only doing charge attacks in his combo, and his charge attack animation is a little bit shorter. So while you can do them, you don't gain as much from them as a unit like Hu Tao. I don't like to jump cancel, so if I had C0, I probably wouldn't jump cancel. Wriothesley being a catalyst unit makes his rotations feel a lot better. Do a normal attack to apply your cryo, get your damage bonus from Chilonin and your res shred, throw down Bennett, get up your pyro application, and then just start doing your combo. And another thing you can do in mostly single target melt, start your rotation with just one normal into a charge attack, and that ensures that the strongest attack in your normal chain will always be doing the melting. And this trick works with both N3C at C0 and N5C at C1. Let's check out a guy with some more help. Some more chunk on him. Even though your charge attacks aren't getting the skill buff, they're still the main goal of Melt Wriothesley, given that they provide the largest hit he can dish out, and they always apply cryo and can always melt. But yeah, even at C0, you can occasionally just get hit and get your charge attack anyways, which is nice. I should also say that I don't actually have that much of an issue with xiangling in this team. Wriothesley already wants Bennett, and Bennett makes xiangling feel a lot less bad. And of course, as everyone knows, she has the strongest pyro application in the game, which ensures that Wriothesley will always be melting his hits. Let's slot in a unit like Dea for a moment to compare. Her application is slow enough that Wriothesley can pretty easily overtake her when spamming charge attacks like this. If you have a slower pyro applier like Dea, you can switch to using combos that have more normal attacks to apply less cryo. But if you want to see the most big melt numbers out of Wriothesley, your main two options are xiangling and Mawika. Yeah, no, it's only xiangling. So let's look at a melt team that doesn't require either of them. And here, all we have to do, boom.
It would be my honor.
This is my favorite Wriothesley team. Actually, I use PMC instead of Dea, but Dea works well here. Emily's the final new unit that makes Wriothesley feel way better than he used to. As well as dealing damage over time, the burning reaction consumes Dendro Aura to create more Pyro Aura on your enemies, and it provides enough Pyro that units like Dea, who have slower application, can still keep up with Wriothesley. Emily isn't necessary here. She doesn't do anything specific with the burning reaction. You could technically use Nahida, and the EM buff from her burst is actually somewhat useful, but I find Emily's ease of use and personal damage contribution kind of unmatched. She's by far my favorite option in this team, and she also looks pretty. That's not no, that's C1. You're not supposed to do that. Emily doing her thing. Having a skill that's too good, that stays up for too long. Go back to sleep. Thank you. This was also another thing that I did. Aside from the defensive buffs that Dea gives, she can hold Forest Regalia, if any of you have it built. Lets her buff Ryo's EM by 120. She's mainly a defensive unit, but she does have some small opportunities for damage by the nature of not really caring about her gear. So she triggers a reaction. She creates, where is it? There's the leaf. Boop. Oh. You can even see I overtook a tiny bit. I had a cryo aura for a moment, but we can look at this. When you have a cryo aura on your opponent and you trigger a melt, it just disappears. Whereas when you have a cryo and a dendro and you melt, it starts burning and creates more pyro. So you're able to get it back and start melting quicker. This is the version that I've been playing. Probably would be better with Mawika, considering she's almost objectively better than PMC in every way. But this gives the team a scroll holder. And as I just showed off with the cryo and dendro auras, if you have both of them on your enemy and you trigger your melt, he can buff both elements at the same time, giving a pretty significant buff to both Wriothesley and Emily. And of course, your main DPS being a cryo catalyst unit gives you a pretty easy way to put out burning so you can reproc scroll. Kind of rotating like garbage here, so I'm going to go back to Simon. Yes, I will continue to call him different things throughout all my videos. No, I won't explain why. Sometimes he's Simon, sometimes he's Dorito, sometimes he's Robot. Deal with it. Since the hold version of PMC's skill can be a little inconsistent, I think I prefer using the tap version in this team. Although that's not really a massive problem with Wriothesley. He's getting real close and punching people anyways. Those are the two main variations of melt that you can play. You can technically do stuff like sunfire. I'm not a big fan of sunfire. I guess I could actually look at it for a second, see how it feels. I actually think Emily would still be good here. So I'm gonna keep going burnmelt. Cryo, Emily, boom.
Everybody stand up. Wait, hear me.
Now.
Yeah, okay, well that works. If you don't have a pyro off fielder and you want to use Jean, go Sunfire Jean. Now let's check out Ryo's other main archetype. As a Fontaine unit with HP manipulation, he has some inherent synergy with Farina, which has the side effect of making Wriothesley-Farina teams freeze teams. And while the rotations are less strict and freeze itself gives a sort of defensive utility, you're basically trading damage for comfort here. You're not going to see the same numbers as you would out of a melt team, out of both Wriothesley and his teammates. Just like melt, there are two main ways that you can go with this. You can turn it into a generic good damage team by going something like Shilon and Bennett, two strong supports that happen to heal, but mostly are there to boost these guys' damage. This is less of a dedicated freeze team and more of just a good damage team that can freeze. And unlike other freeze teams, it has the upside of being able to be played against bosses. Wriothesley also has more freedom of what he can do with his combos in this team. Because he's not looking to react to specific hits, you can just kind of spam normal attacks. Or, of course, you could swing with an actual dedicated freeze team. Wriothesley doesn't have much real synergy with freeze, and he actually has a very tiny bit of anti-synergy as his charge attack shatters enemies, but you can pretty much always freeze them again right away. Your other two options here are pretty flexible. Get someone who can heal to stack fanfare like Kokomi or Charlotte and Barbara. Charlotte's on banner, so that's nice. Shilon's actually still a good option, so you can keep her if you want. And then grab someone to deal damage. Xingqiu and Yelan are always good choices, but you also have Kaya and Rosaria. Shenhe is also a great choice here. She can be a little difficult to fit into melt, but works much better as a freeze support. Lali can also actually be a surprisingly good option here. She won't shred resistance for Wriothesley, but she will for your Hydro teammates, and she can buff him through Scroll Set. I actually find that this is one of the few situations where I enjoy using Mika. He's a full party healer who does a little bit of attack speed buffing and also activates Cryo Resonance, which you can utilize this to build even more crit damage. I don't have a freeze build for Wriothesley because I just don't love freeze as an archetype, but it is a valid and comfy way to play him. You could also go something like Yelan, which I think is what I'm gonna go with for now. Again, not really a dedicated freeze team, more of a damage-oriented team that can freeze, but it's a lot more freeze-oriented. Wriothesley doesn't work particularly well or poorly with freeze, it's just kind of something he can do. So if the comfort offered by freeze is something that you like, then you can use him here. And while I've elected for Furina variants, of course there are freeze teams without her. Notably, this is actually a pretty good case for Mona. She gives only a slightly weaker buff than Furina with the crown skill, and its usual problems caused by the 5-second uptime aren't there in freeze teams. Because for some reason, freezing an enemy that has Mona's Omen debuff on them pauses its countdown. I think there is an upper limit to how long it can last, but you are getting more than 5 seconds of buff. Although to compensate for Mona's lack of personal damage, you probably want a Res Shredder, be that Shilonen or one of the Animo units. Now, for the final Wriothesley Furina team, the fabled bain-marie. I probably pronounced that wrong, but I don't care because it's French. This one is weird and surprisingly good. It's this weird mixture melt team, burgeon team that uses the fridge interaction, which is what the name is referring to. It's some type of like oven thing that keeps things warm. I don't exactly remember. It gets into elemental gauge, which is like way outside of the scope of this video. All you really need to know is Furina and Baizhu provide a good core for a lot of talent damage to happen from Furina herself, Wriothesley, and xiangling. And Furina and Wriothesley are able to use xiangling's pyro to vape and melt, respectively, but they also put out xiangling's pyro fast enough for Baizhu to generate a few bloom cores, which xiangling can then burgeon. It's a lot of wild interaction, and I think it's just better to watch it play. Boom. And let's check my energy. It's actually not too bad. Let's see if I can do a second rotation without batterying. Ridiculous. I used to play this team a lot more before I picked up Emily, and I kind of forgot how good it was. That's one of the big caveats in this team. It is pretty good damage-wise, but normally if you're playing the xiangling variant, you have 3 units who have fairly high energy costs, and none of them are the same element, so they really can't help batter each other outside of Fav, which is kind of what you have to do. Oh yeah, that's also, I forgot to swap to Fav. I shouldn't be on engulfing anymore. Okay, yeah, never mind. There's way too many reactions going on for PMC to keep up, so let's just go xiangling. And my energy needs, even now, are looking a little rough. God, I really just forgot how like surprisingly good this team was. Although I don't think scroll is doing anything for me. I think I was kind of gaslighting myself there. I don't really know what you could go on her. I guess something like Gilded Dreams can work. I'm not really seeing any buffing sets that catch my eye here. It's a funky one, but it's a lot of fun and it's real silly. If you have the units, I would recommend it. That's it from me. Well, I talked a lot about his C1 and I belabored how his kit doesn't feel the best at C0. C1 doesn't unlock any extra functionality of his kit, it just makes his kit feel a little more smooth to play. And even that is just my opinion. What you think is fun is entirely up to you, and if you find C0 Wriothesley combos to be more fun than C1 Wriothesley combos, then that's what you think. I can't stop you. I talked about it a lot because Wriothesley is a unit that I'm passionate about. He's my favorite character in the game, and I want people to know what they're going for when they pull for Wriothesley. If you like this video, you can leave a like. If you like me, you can subscribe, and I hope you all have a lovely day.